Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Ramon. If you're watching me for the first time, I'm a Nigeria designer based in Lagos, Nigeria. So today we are drafting a corset top with basque effect and also have a armhole line. And I also attach the sleeve to it, but in this tutorial we are not drafting this thing. We are only concentrate on the corset top with basque and armhole. So for my pattern edges, I like to come down by 1 inches, which allow me to adjust my pattern if there's any adjustments I have to do on top edges of the pattern. And that will be my shoulder line. On my shoulder line, I'm measuring my bust point, which is 10 inches distance between your shoulders to the bust point, and 13 inches for my underbust, and 70 inches for the waistline. So I'm just drawing the line out. I'm using my marker to draw the line out. For my shoulder line, I'm measuring my shoulder, which is 15 inches. 15 inches divided by 2, which is 7.5. So I mark my 7.5 there, my shoulder length, and come down by 1 inches for the shoulder slant, because our shoulder is not straight. And I use my ruler to join straight line down to the bust line, and that line will be my armhole length. So I'm marking my neckline. I'm using 3.5 for the width and 3 inches for the length. I'm using my curve ruler to connect the dots together to form my neckline. So I'm drawing in my shoulder slant. So I'm measuring 8 inches for my armhole length. So I'm using my set square to draw in the line out. And that place will be my armhole length. So for my bust line, I'm coming up by 2 inches. I use my set square to draw in the line out. For my armhole length, I'm dividing 8 inches because my armhole is 8 inches, so I'm dividing 8 inches by 2, which is 4. From the 4 that I mark, I'm coming in by half an inch. So I'm using my curve ruler to draw in my armhole line. I'm just labeling my pattern, my chest line, bust line, under bust line, and the waist line. So for my waistline, I'm measuring my hip length, which is 8 inches, distance between your waist to the hip. Mine is 8 inches, so I'm marking my 8 inches there. I'm drawing the line out, and that place will be my hip line. The next thing I did is mark my bust span, which is my nipple to nipple. Mine is 7 inches. 7 inches divided by 2, which is 3.5. So I'm just marking my 3.5 for my bust line, my under bust, and the waistline. I also come down and measure 3.5 for my hip line. So I'm using my ruler to connect the points together. The next thing I did is taking in my waist side, which is 1 inch. I divide 1 inch on both sides. half an inch from center front and half an inch on my side front. So for the bust line, I come down by 1 inch because we don't want anything to affect our bust point. And for the hip line, I also come up by 1 inch. So I'm using my set square to connect the points together from the hip, from the waist to the hip, and for the waist to the 1 inch that we drop for the bust line. So for my shoulder line, I measure what I have there, which is 4.5. I divide 4.5 by 2, which is 2.25. So I mark the center and use my set square to connect the lines to the bust points. So the next thing I did is tightening my under bust. So I come in half an inch from my center front. From side front, I come in by 1 inch. So I use my curve ruler to curve it from 1 inch that we drop down for our bust line and connect it to the under bust line. So the next thing is to do is marking my bust radius. So you are going to measure what you have for your bust to the under bust. Mine is 3 inches, so I'm marking it all around. And this will allow us to cut our corset perfectly. For my chest line, I come up by 1 inch. You can come down, you can come up, it depends on what you want. So I measure what I have in the under bust line, which is 2 inches, and I took it and on the 1 inch that I mark up. So I mark 0.7 from the center front and the remaining one from the side front. And I use my curve ruler to connect it to the bust point. For the neck, I measure 6.5. It depends on what you want. You can come up, you can come down. So 6.5 is okay for me. So I mark my 6.5. So for 6.5 that I mark, I took in half an inch. And I use my ruler to draw the lines. So and I mark and I rule it down to the hip line. So I use my curve ruler to connect it to the under bust line. To curve it to the under bust line. And from the armhole curve, I measure what I have here, which is 2.5. So I divide 2.5 by 2. I mark the center. So I mark and I come down by 1 inch. And I use my ruler to roll the line out. So from the bust figure that I mark, I come out by 1 inch. I'm just using my marker to trace the line that I mark to trace the line 1 inch that I mark for my armhole curve. I divide my armhole curve by 2, so and I measure 1 inch down from there, so I'm just using my ruler to trace it out. So from there I mark 1 inch. I come out for my bust radio 1 inch. The reason why I do that is because our other side of breast is larger than the first, and for the corset to accommodate our breast, so I'm using my cuff to connect the lines the points together. I just look at what I'm doing and also connect it to the under bust line. So I repeat the same thing to the center front cuff, so I cuff it also. So for the side front, I mark half an inch. So I use my ruler to connect the line to the shoulder. And I also connect my under bust line to the waistline. So I'm just marking all unwanted space there using my marker, and also at the upper part of the corset. All the place I'm marking is unwanted. We don't need that place. So I'm taking in my measurements. My bust is 34 divided by 4, which is 8.5. So I measure what I have on my chest line, the data that I took on my chest line. So I'm replace it back from the bust line. So I also mark my sewing allowance. So the same thing applies to my under bust. My under bust divided by 4. So I'm replace the data that I took in on my under bust and replace it back, and my sewing allowance the same plus my sewing allowance. The same thing applies to waist. My waist divided by 4. My waist is 28 divided by 4, which is 7, and plus 1 is that I took in, and 1 is sewing allowance because I'm adding 1 is sewing allowance to it. And the same thing to the hip also. My hip divided by 4, which is my hip is 38 divided by 4, which is 9, plus 1 is that. So I'm just connect the points together. So our front pattern is ready. Remain our back. So from back, I measure my shoulder, which is 15 inches divided by 2, which is 7.5. So I come down by 1 inch for my shoulder slants, and I'm using my ruler to just connect all the lines that I marked from the front. So I'm just using my ruler to draw it to the back, my chest, my bust, my waist, and also the hip line. So the next thing that I do, just trace the line out, and I connect the one is that I draw from the shoulder to the bust line. So I mark 8 inches for my armhole length. and use my ruler to join the line out, the same thing I did at the front. I marked my neckline, which is 3.5. So I marked 3.5 and I connect it to the shoulder slants, and I divide my armhole lines by 2, which is 4, and I took in 1/2 inches, and I use my cuff ruler to connect the points together. So the next thing is to do is taking our darts. So for the darts, I marked 3.5 from the bust line, the waistline, and the hip line. 3.5. So I use my ruler. To connect the points together. And I label in my chest line, my bust line, my waist, and the hip line. So from my waistline, I took in 1/2 inch on both sides. And connect it to the bust line. And for my hip line, I come up by 1 inch and also connect the waist to it. So I'm taking in my measurements. My bust divided by 4. My bust is 34. 34 divided by 4, which is 8.5. I'm marking my 8.5 like so. And also from the waist, my waist is 28. 28 divided by 4 plus my darts, 1 inch for darts, and also for the hip also my hip divided by 4. So I'm using my ruler to connect the points together. And from my shoulder line, I measure what I have there, which is 4.5, and divided it by 2, which is 2.25. And the next thing that I did is mark my neck length, and connect it to my shoulder line. From 1 inch that I drop down for my neck back, I'm going to measure my new neckline, which is 9 inches. You can do more than that. It depends on what you want. If you want it to low more than that, it depends on what you want. So for me, 9 inches is okay. So I'm connecting it to my shoulder slants. The shoulder line. I'm marking in my chest line. And connect it to the bust line. So from there, I'm just marking in my sewing allowance, which is 1 inch. So for my hip line, I measure 3.5. From there, I measure 1.5. So for my waistline, I come down by 1 inch. And I use my cuff ruler to join in the lines. So this is how the front look like. I'm just using my set square to draw a straight line for sewing allowance. So the one that I'm crossing is not needed. So for my back also, I measure 1.5. 1 inches. So I use my ruler to draw in a straight line. That one will be our new length for the back. So I'm just, so the line I'm marking is not needed. So I'm just cutting the pattern out. I'm just reminding you that you should not forget that that's where our new armhole is. So I'm just labeling my pattern. I'm just cutting my back also. So from the center back down there, I'm measuring 1.5, and for the up from the bust line, I took in 2 inches, and I'm using my ruler to connect the points together. And the reason why we are doing that is because I don't want a zip. I'm using a rope for the back, so I'm using my scissors to cut it out. And I also close my waist darts. I don't need the waist dart for the back, so I close it. And I use my tape measurement to tape it together, and I also label it back. So guys, this will be the end of today's tutorial. I'm already sewing the pattern and it came out nice, so I'm going to share it with you guys in my next video. Don't forget to like my video, subscribe to my channel. Please guys, subscribe. I really need a subscription. And also leave a comment. See you guys in my next video.